hold on, I had to unmute. Yes, here. My apologies.
Sure. Mr. Mushak? Here. Ms. Langalis?
Here.
Ms. Shockley?
Here.
Mr. Baxendale?
Here.
And Mr. Meglio?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, first on the agenda is the 824 referral, DPW Walk Bridge Easement Agreement Report and recommended actions. So who's on?
Good evening, everyone. I think that me and Darren Callahan is here. Darren, if you don't mind, just start because it's a little bit noisy where I am, and then I'm happy to go through the maps if you want.
Hey, listen,
Sure.
Vanessa, go have that drink that you've been having. You're at that bar in Brazil, aren't you? So
I'm at my sister's house, but the kids just arrived from a party. She has some friends over, so it may be a little bit noise in the background, but it's fine.
I think Darren can handle it. It's up to you. But, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you're on vacation, enjoy your time off and whatever you want.
So thanks, Vanessa, for jumping on. I appreciate it. I hope you're enjoying your vacation. Good to see you. So I'm just going to run through this briefly. These are various easements. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So these are various easements that the Department of Transportation is looking to acquire relative to the Walk Bridge project. DOT has acquired a number of easements to date. This is just a few more easements in that series of easements that they need to construct the project. These are easements that Department of Public Works, I'm sure Vanessa will confirm later on in the presentation, that the city has known about for quite some time, but they're just moving along in the order they're moving along through DOT. So what we have here is really three categories of easements. The vast majority of easements that are before this panel are wetland mitigation easements. This is really just well, it's not really. It's solely for the purpose of DOT acquiring the various environmental permits they need to perform this project, because it's, you know, being done on and over and adjacent to the Norwalk River. So these are areas, you know, on the riverbank, directly adjacent to the river, that need to be protected, invasive species removed, appropriate species, certain planting of appropriate species, and then maintaining those species to maintain the wetlands in the area. I'm not an environmental expert, so I've just exhausted my knowledge base on that. But in a nutshell, that's what they're acquiring. That's the first in the series. The second in the series is what I would call access or ingress egress easements. These are simply easements that allow DOT to get from, you know, the public roadway to their easement areas, whether they're over a parking lot or you know, a private driveway or a sidewalk. They need to be able to, for technical purposes, be able to get from the public area over private land, city land, still private land, to their easement areas. So there's a series of these that are just access to and from these wetlands mitigation easement areas. And the last one, which I think is really the only truly substantive one, for the most part, is the DOT has determined that they need to acquire an additional strip of land. And Vanessa will show you the map on this one. exactly where it is, but it is under the existing footprint of the IMAX theater that's going to be torn down. And they need this. They need this for not only their construction purposes to build the bridge, but also for future, you know, an ongoing maintenance needs. So in perpetuity. The last one is they need a temporary, is the only other one that I think is really, you know, really substantive in nature. The one I just mentioned was a permanent one. This one is a temporary one. This is for construction purposes. They need a little bit of space over the parking lot at 4 Water Street, which again is directly adjacent to the IMAX theater. Is going to be torn down. We've already granted them, we came before this body, I don't know, probably about a year ago, maybe 8 months ago, to give them permission on a temporary basis, or we call it a right of entry, so that they could potentially, because they didn't have their paperwork in order to get, you know, the full easement, which we're talking about today. So we had hoped that they could maybe, you know, tear down the IMAX theater, you know, while everyone was kind of indoors during COVID. But for a variety of reasons, they couldn't do that. I think it was their environmental permits held them up. So they're now coming back, and even though we've given that temporary right, they're coming back and formalizing, acquiring their easement and paying us our due compensation for it. So those are the various categories. Vanessa will quickly walk you through where they are on the survey maps. Each of these things, I will tell the commission, we did have independently appraised in a similar fashion that we would have an appraisal done for tax assessment purposes. Similar professionals are used, they're all MAIs. And in each case, we're getting equal to or in excess of the value that our own appraiser can come up with. And that's all I got.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Brian, if you can give me rights to share my screen, I can go through the maps quickly.
You should be able to, Vanessa.
Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll start with the last one actually that Darren spoke about, just because it's the first one on the attachment that you guys probably received the package. So as Darren stated, DPW has been working with the Walk Bridge program for many years now, and we were totally aware of those right of ways. So there was nothing new that was a surprise that came in front of us. So this is just really to finalize things that have been discussed between DPW, the city, and DOT. So just to give you guys an idea where we are, this is the North Water Street. This is the edge of the parking lot here, the North Water parking lot, and this kind of circle here is where is the existing IMAX that will be demolished. There was already an easement taking under the bridge. This is where the new walk bridge will go. And one thing that happened for this easement is that this easement has to be extended up to this darker line that I have here to my right. The reason why this area had to be extended was because of all the trenching that they ended up doing to bring all the communication under the river. And now that will be coming up and get to the abutment of the bridge that will be here. Also for maintenance purpose and to be able to have access to the bridge underneath. That's why this area got a little bit extended. Besides that, there is a little bit of an area right in here. It's very minimum, it's about 270 square feet. And up here, it shows what it is that will help through the constructability of the bridge. This is a permanent easement. I just want to let you guys know it's not a construction easement. So this will be a take from us, and this is where we're getting most of the financial benefit of it, because it is a take. Another thing that will happen in this map, although it's not settled, we're still in negotiation that there is a chance that we may be able to use some of the space under this bridge for future parking. It is not set on stone yet, but we have hope that we'll be able to have the right to use this for future parking lot. So do you guys have any questions related to this map?
This is Tamara Shockley. You're saying it's a permanent take. What are you taking? What property?
It is
what's there
just,
now?
it is a city, it is the city property. So before the easement that was already approved was around here, and now they're extending a little bit, make it a little bit wider up to this point. Just to give you an idea of where that is, this is the existing IMAX. You see this arch here? It is kind of the footprint of the IMAX. So before, that line was going to be kind of up to, let's say, a third of that circle, and now we're going up to 2/3 of it. So this is what will be. As of now, it is just kind of a grass area under the bridge. The abutment of the new bridge goes around here.
Just to add to Vanessa's comments there, the word take is, it's kind of, let me unpack that a little bit. All it means is that the easement that they're requiring is going to be a permanent easement or in perpetuity, instead of a number of the other easements that they've acquired are only temporary easements, and they end when they stop needing the easement for purposes of constructability and construction of the project.
Who has responsibility for restoring it into an attractive, aesthetically pleasing finish, bearing in mind this is one of the nice corners within Sono?
Well, so DOT is going to have an
DOT, yes, and we have regular meetings with them about how that whole area will look after it is complete. So there is kind of aesthetics committee that have been meeting with them for a few years. About maybe a couple of months ago, they sent us some renderings to this area. And then this committee met one more time with some comments back. But as of now, it is pretty much kind of a grass here, and where all the utilities that will be coming to feed the abutment and the bridge, it will have a fence around. We asked for a particular kind of fence that they agree on. And there is also hope that we'll be able to bring the NRVT trail that in the future will be built along the driveway that runs behind the aquarium to wrap also under this easement along the water and connect to what we plan to build, what we call a Sono Wharf here.
Thank you.
Can I move to the next map?
Vanessa, just continue. We'll stop you when we have questions, okay?
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Again, this is, just to give you guys an idea of where we are, is pretty much the same location. This map is kind of, it's flipped from the other. So what you're seeing here is North Water. Here is the river. Here is the footprint of the IMAX. This is just kind of a temporary construction easement where DOT will need to have access to these parking spaces. There will be a fence around because they need to use this area for staging while they are demolishing the IMAX. As Darren stated before, we have been in front of this commission in the past for an agreement for, it was a right of entry that we temporarily gave it to them with the hope that they would be able to demolish the IMAX before this past summer. Unfortunately, due to their permit issues with DEEP, the demolition of the IMAX is tied up with that permit. They couldn't do it before. And by then now we finalized the map. So that's why now the map is finalized and is really just kind of a construction easement for access during the duration of the IMAX. After the IMAX is demolished, this space goes back to us and the parking authority. they do not have any plans to take further spaces during construction of the bridge, with the exception that if we have some storms, either extremely high winds or snow, some of the brooms will be around here. They may need to block the parking lot to be able to have the broom laid down on the ground. So that's the only time that this parking lot will be affected after the IMAX is demolished.
Vanessa, this is Tamara. You're demolishing the IMAX completely, but the Maritime Aquarium stays?
Correct. So also, Tamara, I don't know if you remember, actually, it was part of the negotiation with DOT and the aquarium that what they call is that they gave money to the aquarium as to build the 4D theater that got built and completed this year, plus a new CO tank in lieu of the take of the IMAX and the demolition. So the aquarium just got a brand new 4D movie theater.
Okay.
Vanessa, this is Tammy Langalis. Do you know when they start demolishing the IMAX theater, where those trucks are going with the demolished brick or, building? And how
Yes,
many-
so for all the work that will be related to the bridge, there are hauling routes and also detour routes that was approved by DPW and TMP. So it's not, I cannot give you by heart exactly which is the route, but those were routes that have been approved by us where they're gonna go. So usually it's the main routes. We do not allow them to go to small streets.
So primarily it would somehow have to get out of Sono and get onto I-95.
Well, they have when, near the ramp, when you go out of the ramp exit, if you're going northbound on exit 15, you know that when you do the big turn that you see on the right, some kind of sections there, have you noticed? That has been up for about 4 or 5 years. They've been using that as where the area that they bring material, they separate for environmental purpose, and that gets hauled out. So it's very close to the area. Usually they will go through probably Northwater, MLK, and up to the ramp.
Okay.
I don't know for sure
Trying to keep it-
exactly what is the route here, but you're not gonna see the big trucks going through small streets.
Okay, thank you. Keeping it out of the residential areas will be good. How long will it take? to demolish?
That is the goal, Tammy. Maybe unless if there is no really access to a main arterial right next to it, otherwise it should be okay. Also, we have clearance issues through the area in some of those small bridges. So that's why they probably gonna need to make a left, go through Monroe, and then MLK.
So they're probably going to go right down Washington Street.
No, they cannot, no, that's not the route.
Okay.
They'll continue
Well,
presumably up North
whatever
Water
you can
Street.
do to direct them, either go slowly, because we've had so much dump truck traffic in the city this summer, and it's really impactful on human beings that are out and about. Thank you for whatever consideration you can tell these companies that are going to be hauling the IMAX away to be considerate of our residents.
Definitely, I will.
Thank you.
Okay, so these are the last two maps is really the wetland mitigation easements. So as Darren perfectly explained, as part of the permit for the bridge, they need to restore some of the wetlands. So there was years of conversation between DOT and our conservation department and DEP on where those areas would be. So conservation already blessed these areas. There were a couple of comments, walkthroughs. You guys approved some of those areas already across the river. on near where is Liberty Square and also next to our DPW garage along on the other side of the river. This is pretty much across the street. So again, this is North Water. Right here is the driveway to the entrance of the parking lot, where is the playground for the oyster shell. And these are the two areas here that we can see in the map. So this is one of the restoration wetland easements. And then the other one, I'm just gonna shift to the other map because this is the cut line for the two maps. So I just want that you guys have an idea. You're seeing one side of the map and now let's go see the other one. Back to my line here. This is the entrance to the driveway. Here is the playground. So there is a couple of different easements on these two maps because they need access to be able to access the wetland. And those are temporary easements, that is really access easements. For safety reasons, we ask them to also block the playground so there will be no kids running around when they need to do some of this work. This work should not take as much time. It is really limited when they can do some of that work. It's usually during the winter month. I believe it is November through February that the permit allowed them to do that. And some of what you guys see here is really just for access, where the major really restoration is along the water where are the marshes. So those is what the three maps are showing.
Okay, thank you. Any commissioners have any questions?
No, I do recall this design before, and this is just a step that we have to take, and I do recall this in detail beforehand.
Yeah, we've seen other ones. I'm sure we might be seeing some more. So I'm putting forth the resolution to approve as we have it here in our packet. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, we move forward. Vanessa, thank you for joining us from South America. Enjoy.
Thank you. As we
Bye-bye.
see here, boa noite.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Vanessa.
Ciao. Okay, next on our agenda is the zoning commission referral, economic and community development, text amendment to add outdoor dining as an allowed accessory use to all business zones. So you also might note this morning on last minute changes. I'm not in favor because we all have other things to do. And my thing is, once I go through the package, I don't want to go back. So that was the reason for my comment. You know, last minute things might be easy to throw things over the table and then we have to receive it and act. So that was the point of my note, not Brian's fault, where the changes came from. So what do we have? Who do we have? Talk about this a minute before we discuss.
That'll just be me, Fran. So essentially, the ordinance committee of the Common Council is working on the outdoor dining ordinance to revise it based on kind of some of the results of COVID-19 and how we allowed outdoor dining throughout the city for all restaurants. So in order for them, based on how they've drafted their ordinance, for it to align with the zoning regulations, is we need to allow it in all business zones. So all restaurants can take advantage of the outdoor dining regulation. So if you have frontage on the city property, you can have outdoor dining on sidewalks. And then if you have a patio, you can put outdoor dining on your patio on your private property. So that's the gist of the regulation. We, throughout COVID, we've been doing outdoor dining, and I think we haven't gotten maybe one complaint regarding it. So overall, it's been, not very controversial, and I think the restaurants appreciated it.
Yep.
So Brian, they have to apply from looking at the text. So it goes to April 1st to November 31st, and they have to apply every year, or is it?
Right, so they have to renew their permits each year. That to give us a layout, make sure that they're maintaining ADA access. They have to pull insurance with the city if they're using city property, kind of stuff that they've always been doing for the existing outdoor dining.
Is there a fee for that or is it free?
So in the past, we've charged a fee. I don't know what the Common Council's intent with this is, if they want to do it as no fee. When during COVID, we did not charge a fee. But prior than that, I think we charged about $50.
Okay,
Brian, I
And
had a
you can-
quick question. I had a quick
Go
question.
ahead.
Fran.
Yeah.
And that complaint that you received from person,
Can't-
was it because of, sorry, Fran?
can't hear you.
I'm sorry, that complaint you got, Brian, regarding this potential amendment, was that because of adjacent restaurant, other businesses? Was it
No.
just walking or safety, or what was it?
It was some of the tables and chairs that were on the sidewalk were not maintaining ADA access. So that was the one complaint that we got. So we had to, we notify the restaurant, we let them know, hey, can you pull the tables in closer to the restaurant? Make sure you have 4 feet of sidewalk available. And that was that.
Okay, as far as the performance bond, is that something that they have to apply for each year, or are they just putting funds aside for incidentals, or make sure that they're financially competent?
So we have them add the city as additionally insured to their insurance. So for general liability, liquor liability, and then they have their waiver of subrogation. So they just add the city to that for, I think it's $1 million per occurrence. And that's kind of our.
I think that's a
Insurance.
really good idea, because it takes the liability away from us, because when people touch the city sidewalk, they automatically assume it's the city's problem, and I'm happy that we're able to offset that potential hazard by having them on the hook for that. I have, you can go ahead, Madam Chair, I just wanted to get that.
No, I had a Brian, is it 4 feet? They have to have 4 feet or 5 feet? I thought it used to be 5 feet of, I guess, space that people could, or 5 feet from the sidewalk in, and then have the tables. Is that correct or incorrect?
I believe they changed it to 4. I think ADA used to be 3 feet. Now it's up to 4 feet. And so I think that's how they have it written. So I think we're going with the 4.
You just, Madam Chair, could we add a couple things to this, like advertising and heating sources and obstruction? If we could have it somehow uniform, so that if you're looking down a row of businesses, it could be somewhat consistently laid out. Does that make sense, Madam Chair, with advertising? Because businesses like to advertise tents with their menus, and there's some things that maybe that's under the obstruction piece, but I'm not sure if that's clear enough. If I'm making sense.
I don't know, no, like I'm thinking of Washington Street, right? As you look down on the, I don't want to use the word, it's not conformed, that's for sure. Every restaurant has its own layout or whatever it is.
I'm more concerned about these inline plazas with restaurants on these plazas, and also along Main Street and Main Avenue. I'm looking at those types of businesses as well. It might not be as in front of your face like Washington Street, but somewhat of uniformity.
I don't know, Steve, so I don't know what the rest of the commission or what your thoughts are. Do we have outdoor on Main Avenue? I guess I haven't seen on the sidewalk. I don't know.
It was done on the
So
sidewalk, mostly private. They're mostly like, because they're kind of in like the strip malls. So they're kind of set back from the road. So what they've used is kind of those sidewalks to get into the restaurant. They've taken up some of those areas.
Yeah, I'm thinking of that luncheria, whatever it's called over there. They have space, and
Valencia?
I don't recall. Huh?
Talking about Valencia, Fran?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the one. So I don't recall myself, unless you guys do actual on the sidewalk on Main Avenue. Steve, I know what you mean, but I don't know, Steve Ferguson, I know what you're saying, but I don't know how we would, say that, right? Conformity. I don't know. Brian, do you have any thoughts? I don't know what the answer is. Brian Baker. Brian.
Yeah, no, I'm
You
thinking.
I don't know what the answer would be, and how do we could, you know, you don't need to force conformity and, or standards, I should say. And I don't know how we would put that, in. Even on Washington Street, it's not uniform. You know, you got Donovan's doing its thing on the corner there. You got you got those inside the windows are open, and you got the ones on the sidewalk. I would challenge you, Brian, to say that they're really 4 feet out. I pass by there a lot, so I'm not sure. In previous years ago, somebody from your office there would actually go with a measuring tape and, you know, measure in the middle of the day or something. So I don't know if that's something we want to do. You know, we're coming out of COVID. We want businesses to be successful and stuff. So I don't know any other restrictions right now. What is
Yeah,
the
the
rest
other
of the
one,
board?
Steve, kind of to your point, is we do limit them based on their frontage, that store frontage. You know, you can't spill onto your neighbors or the tenant adjacent to use frontage. You know, you can't block their door. So
I say that the reason why I mentioned that with the wider lens is because some of these eateries have adjacent neighbors or other tenants that, let's say for instance, a restaurant's next to a nail shop, okay? The nail shop might not need outdoor dining, so sometimes these eateries would expand their outside patio to the adjacent property. And I didn't know if with the insurance, would that cover the other person or just their particular space? So maybe I'm thinking too much into it, but I'll leave it up to you all to chop that one up. You know, Brian and Tammy and Tamara and Mary and Mike. That's just my thought. I don't know how much you read on this, but.
So when you're on private property, you're not required to do the insurance because you're on your own property. So what we've done with some on Washington Street is if they want, like if they're next to a tenant that's not a restaurant and they want to expand, and we make them get permission from that restaurant, and then that's just tacked on to their insurance.
Based on the address, okay. It's a bigger undertaking for the planning and zoning department. I do understand that. So we appreciate your patience in that. And it looks better from my standpoint when you're traveling the road and see outside dining, not just with COVID, but just with the connectivity of just the culture that we have of eating. We all like to eat, but safety is a big thing. And sometimes people spill out with advertising and tent placards and the heating lamps, and it becomes, even roped out, perimeters. I'm not sure how the landscaping of things look, but I'm just looking at this from a safety standpoint. Kids walking out, dogs being walked. I'm just looking at this from pedestrian, elderly, ADA, continuous flow of walking, and window shopping.
This is Tamara. I see 2 different areas. I understand it for Washington Street, but for Main Avenue, those restaurants are so close to the sidewalk that it would be difficult to see them having outdoor dining, but I do see them having the placards on the sidewalk where you have to walk around. So wouldn't this be more of an issue of enforceability with a focus mainly on Main Avenue as opposed to Washington Street, because Washington Street has that area already where people have the outdoor dining, and it's enforceable to enforce this particular regulation as opposed to Main Avenue, where you have a restriction in property space.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick idea, Tamara, just to piggyback that. The reason why this is in my mind, you look at Dry Dock. There's outside dining there. You come right into a parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
The parking is right a button up to potential outdoor dining. I'm not picking on that particular location, but just a visual of how one could look at it. And I know you all can't think of every particular eatery. Maybe you have a map. Maybe it's marked out and pinned down, but I'm just looking at it just from a safety standpoint.
Yeah. So what I'll say is, COVID with the Governor Lamont's executive orders for outdoor dining throughout essentially all zoning regulations that could apply to outdoor dining. So if you had a, private property, like you were a dry dock, essentially the executive orders let you put outdoor dining throughout your entire parking lot. You no longer had to provide parking. So this ordinance, it doesn't do that again. And what it does is, if you have a front yard and you want to put a patio in on your private property, you can now do that. And you wouldn't have to provide additional parking for that, but you can't take up your parking spaces anymore. That once that executive order is lifted, then, you're back to having to provide your off-street parking again.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for clearing that up. I appreciate it.
Right, so we have a resolution here. This is to, it's a text amendment to allow outdoor dining as an accessory use to all business zones. Now, planning and zoning staff is up to them to monitor and, check on things and whatever it is. I'm going to put forth to approve this resolution. We want businesses to succeed. And do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I wasn't able to ask a question. If I can wait until you put forth the motion, if there's going to be discussion.
No, go ahead, put your question up now before we vote.
I was trying to, thank you. Brian Baker, how does this impact once the pandemic is over, the parking regulations? Because some smaller restaurants might have 10 seats inside and then they have 10 seats outside, and they've in essence doubled their business, but they haven't had to address anything for parking. Is that going to hold true forever?
Yeah, so from April 1st through November 31st, that's kind of how it's functioned in the past. Like on Washington Street, you could put, additional tables out in front of your business, but you didn't have to provide parking for them. So it's kind of the same standard being applied across the board, that if you put out tables from April 1st to November 31st under this regulation, that from that time point, you do not need to provide additional parking for it.
Does anybody have any concern that these temporary dining spaces, not the ones on the sidewalk perhaps, but ones on patios, might become permanent parking space, dining spaces, and then therefore they're not within the parking requirement for a restaurant? I'm not trying to kill the business. I'm just asking the question.
This is a Brian Baker question.
I don't know if it's Brian or Steve, whoever can answer it.
Well, the other option that you have is that you tell the businesses that they would need to provide the additional parking for it. A lot of the times restaurants are built to their parking, essentially saying like what the parking they have is what they can provide essentially for floor space.
And they have to apply every year, right? They have to apply for a permit every year.
Right.
Right.
Right. And this is just April 1st to November 31st. So this isn't, year round.
I have a question. Are we finished? Tammy, were you finished?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. After all the good points brought up by Steve and Tammy and everyone else, I'm a little embarrassed to bring up something kind of stupid, but my birthday is November 30th. And as long as I've been alive, we've never had a day after my birthday in November. There is no November 31st. So I don't know what to deal with this, but it's December 1st. When I go to bed at night and it's my birthday and I drank too much, I get up in the month of December with a hangover. So I know for a fact there is no November, and I just confirmed it in the book. So anyway, that's a little levity here, but somebody made a mistake and didn't check the calendar.
Well, maybe it's February 30th instead, right, Mike?
Yeah, maybe it's, yeah. But anyway, I guess we can vote on this, and the text will be amended again by the legal department. Is that correct?
We're going, first of all, everybody write down that Mike's birthday is November 30th.
Now we know.
So it's coming up.
Well,
we know.
That was my ultimate goal, was to let you
I know.
get lots of money in the mail.
Got it. We'll send you a card. Okay. So please, I'm going to put forth the resolution with the change to November 30th and fix the typo in here. So I'm going to put forth the resolution to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Steve Ferguson seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. And I'll say this again, I can't see everybody, so Tammy or everybody, if you're trying to speak and well, you can't, we don't hear you, you know, like do something like this so Brian Baker can see you and call on you,
Yeah,
okay?
Fran,
Thank
normally
you.
Mike Mushak is your eyes and ears for these kind of things.
I approved it, Fran.
Mike Mushak, yeah, he'll know, right, so yeah, put the hand up.
You're right, Steve. I
Okay,
had done that before. I was not on my game. I was so worried about November 31st that I wasn't paying any attention.
You were thinking birthday, okay, got it. All right, the next item, now, Brian Baker, has Steve Kleppen gone off and left you alone, or is he coming back?
No, he's still here. He's
Okay,
your
I
grand
thought-
finale.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I hadn't seen you, so, you know, I thought maybe you just snuck off over there. So we have
No,
the
I'm
zoning,
here.
okay. Zoning Commission referral. It's the building zone regulation text amendment and building zoning map amendments to create the East Norwalk Village TOD zone, EVTZ. Report and recommended action. Okay, Steve Kleppen, you have a little presentation to take us through?
Sure, and I'll just back everybody up just a little bit. You recall we had the joint public hearing with the zoning commission at the end of September. We've gone back and, you know, took another look at some things, but, you know, there was some questions about the amenity point systems and how those were broken out. So we, you know, taken another critical look at that, refined some of those numbers. We also had our, some of you may have seen Bob Griswatz from the firm DeCarlo and Dahl. He does a lot of peer review work for the city on different development projects. I asked him to take a look at it just to give his 2 cents on things because, you know, potentially down the road, he might have to, you know, evaluate these regulations and, you know, in terms of projects that could come in. So he had a bunch of good points, a lot of clarifications in terms of lining the text up between the design guidelines and the zoning regulations. So we incorporated, you know, those changes in there where appropriate. So that's kind of gone on over the last, I don't know, I guess 6 weeks or so. So the zoning commission looked at the regulations again last week, and you know, they are now at the stage where they're ready to hold their public hearing, which is scheduled for December 15th. So I sent you, I believe, sent you the link last week with the final set of documents on there to review. But I'm happy to go through just a quick overview of the map again, and then just to hit the high points of the changes from, you know, the version you previously saw to what's in front of you now. So just to refresh everybody's memory, here is the map of the area that we're talking about. Up by where my cursor is, this is I-95, exit 16. Running north to south is East Avenue, which kind of terminates down towards Gregory Boulevard and in the cemetery. So these parcels that are black outlined with, I guess, like a silver hatch, these are the parcels proposed to go into the EVTZ. The majority of these parcels now are zone neighborhood business. There are a few, you know, other parcels that are C residential, but for the most part, they're neighborhood business. The green parcels are currently industrial 1 zone. We're not proposing any changes right now to this area, even though the plan had made those recommendations, simply because the industrial zone study, which is kind of out for public comment right now, has some further refinements to that zone. So we're going to hold off and incorporate those changes as part of the approval process of that study. The last feature on the map to point out are these blue parcels. There are some to the northwest side of the map, and a few scattered out on Winfield Street. And those are proposed to change to C residential zone. A lot of those are neighborhood business now, and we felt it would be better to concentrate the commercial areas along the East Avenue corridor. Okay, so let me, sorry, my share screen box is blocking the tabs at the top, so make it move. Okay. All right. Okay, so this slide here, and can you hopefully, is the text large enough, or would you like me to blow it up a little?
Blow it up a little if you would, Steve,
Sure.
please.
How's that?
A lot better.
That's good. Okay. So this is kind of, and it's a one slide presentation. So to save you a little time. And just to hit on the highlights, one of the, the one significant change, and really the only change to the uses that are outlined in the proposed text, we had proposed initially to allow retail and service establishments to be at a much larger square footage. We were up to about 25,000 via site plan approval. So the zoning commission had some concerns about that, and the public had raised some concerns about that as well. So what we did was we dropped it down to 10,000 square feet via site plan approval. And then anything above 10,000 square feet would require a special permit. Right now, the NB, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, I believe it's 8,000 square feet. So we thought 10,000 was the appropriate amount. And just to give everybody a little bit of frame of reference, the Walgreens right off of exit 16 is about 11,000 square feet. So that's kind of the size building that we're talking about.
It's a Rite Aid, not Walgreens.
Oh, right.
Right
Thank
off-
you. Yes, Rite Aid. Yeah, Rite Aid. Another change that was put in, and this was more of an internal request from TMP to try to improve walkability. The minimum sidewalk size was increased from 7 feet to 8 feet. And we've put in some amenity points in there, which I'll talk about in a second, as kind of an inducement to go above the 8 feet. When we recognize that some of the parcels, particularly the smaller parcels, are not very deep. So we are, asking for another foot of their property to include into the sidewalk area. The reason from the increase to 7 to a minimum of 8, and hopefully a little wider, is to allow, wider sidewalks in addition to having a good planting strip where we can put trees in. Maybe they can also serve as drainage functions as well. So that's kind of the thrust behind the change in that area. The area that had, the area that was still a little bit open-ended with some questions was surrounding the amenity points. So what we did was just refine that a little bit and then made it a little more concise. One area that Bob Griswatz had called out was the seating areas and the plaza areas. And he had a concern that, you'd end up with a lot of plazas, and maybe that, would have a lot of kind of vacant void space without not a lot of activity. So we lowered that total maximum allowed for the plazas down in response to that. I mentioned the wider sidewalks and, the need to do that. Ideally, TMP would like to get the sidewalk width up to about 10 feet. So we added in an amenity point for putting in those sidewalks wider than 8 feet. Mr. Griswatz also had a concern about some of the language that we had around the lead building standards. And he brought up some good points that somebody, we already require bike racks and you're in a TOD area. So you shouldn't be getting rewarded for putting in bike racks and then being able to use that as part of your lead or equivalent calculation. So we've kind of tightened up that language to really focus on how the building is constructed and making sure it's kind of, they're moving in as many energy efficient patterns as possible. Next one, thought people, if they expanded the rain gardens to include things like public art as part of that, the point system should reflect that. There was outstanding questions about the rooftop solar. We went back and forth internally and did some outreach through, as many of our peers as we could get in contact with about how you could incorporate the rooftop solar into this kind of system. You know, and Brian Baker had brought this up initially, was, you know, as the solar technology improves, technically you might need less surface area to generate the same amount of electricity. So, you know, also somebody pointed out that, because we had talked about, would the, you know, maybe it would be based on the percent of the building that was powered by the solar, and that's how you would look at that. But somebody pointed out, well, sometimes in the commercial buildings, the landlord only pays for the common space or the outside lighting and those kind of things, whereas the tenants might be responsible for their individual spaces. So you might not be able to truly capture what the power consumed by the building is on that kind of model. So we felt the square footage of building covered was the appropriate course to go. There is some new legislation that the state put out, and I don't know how it quite impacts the taxing district yet, but they are trying to loosen up restrictions on being able to put power back into the grid, where sometimes you're not allowed to do that. But if the legislation would be applicable in this area as well, then that might be further incentive to get additional roof area covered by the solar. We followed a similar tact with the geothermal. And the last change, or excuse me, second to last change, is we lowered the separation distance between parking lots in the residential zone to 5 feet, just based on the narrowness of the lots. But within that 5 feet, that has to be thoroughly screened with, you know, landscaping and a combination of fencing or whatever is deemed appropriate. And the one section that I think got kind of rewritten, and this was I think a staff-driven initiative, was the signage section. I think what we tried to do was really tighten it up and then really align the proposed signage with what you might see in a lot of times in village, particularly in maritime village settings. So we tightened up the signage standards, and I think overall should make it more of a cohesive pattern going forward. And I can, if you didn't get a chance to see it, I can pull up the design guidelines, which has some examples of some of the signage that we're talking about. But that's kind of an overview of the changes. And just as a refresher to everybody, you know, what you're acting on tonight is the zoning text amendment, you know, with the accompanying design guidelines. As you'll recall, the commission approved an amendment to the citywide plan last year, including the East Norwalk TOD plan as part of that. And within that plan, the draft zoning was an appendix to that plan. And for the most part, the draft zoning and the zoning text you'll be voting on tonight are very similar. The majority of the text doesn't change in terms of the bulk and height standards, which are, you know, the big things that people focus on mostly. In response to comments and concerns raised by the Planning Committee of Common Council, we ended up, you know, making a requirement that, you know, sustainable measures be kind of a requirement as part of any kind of amenity points. And they make up, you know, 2/3 to 3/4 of the required points in any submission that has to come forward through special permit. So that's kind of where we are in a nutshell. As I mentioned, the zoning commission is going to hopefully act on this proposal at their December 15th meeting, and then what would, you know, be enacted officially shortly thereafter.
Okay, I have a few questions, but I'm gonna let the commissioners go first if they have questions or whatever. I also want the record to show, in case as it has appeared in other means, that if we're looking down at material, or if, you know, we're looking at the material and Steve was talking or whatever it is, I know we are in active listening mode. And just because we're looking down doesn't mean we're ignoring the speaker or anybody else on this topic or any topic. As some things were published with some comments as to what we were doing. So looking down on material, not looking at the speaker at the moment, doesn't stop us from hearing. We're looking at our notes, we're looking at the material received. So commissioners, I'll go last. who has any questions or whatever.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Steve, I probably should have asked this earlier, but it's kind of a technical question about the change of zoning on Winfield from neighborhood business to C. So basically, back to residential. I'm just curious if someone owns one of those buildings and they're renting to, let's say, a deli, and then that deli moves and they want to move, and then they want to rent to like a nail shop or something else. Is that considered a change of use that would make the nonconformity not valid any longer? Or at what point does the building convert to the new zoning? If it's sold, is it when there's no longer a viable business in there for a certain amount of time? Like, do you know what that scenario would look like in terms of the phasing out of the business? Because honestly, I applaud the businesses that are there. I make no judgment on them at all, but I've pulled into them, and to back out onto Winfield Avenue, because most of them have parking like that where you have to back out onto that busy road, is really dangerous. And so I think it's smart to phase that out. It's not really designed as a commercial district in terms of parking and setbacks, et cetera. But do you have an opinion about that?
Yeah, so there's a few different scenarios in there. So obviously, if it's a deli and it's Fred's Deli and it changes to Bob's Deli, that doesn't impact. They can continue to operate continuously. Even if you change the zone, they're allowed to continue whatever use is currently operating there. Obviously, if they change to, say, they took out a permit to change the deli into an apartment, for example, or a residential unit, then they would lose their ability to go back to the deli at a later point, because they've now become conforming to the regulations versus becoming non-conforming. The one scenario you mentioned, which is an interesting one, is if they go from one commercial use to another commercial use. Typically, how those things work is they look at a scale of intensity. So if it was a use that was another retail or service use and it didn't demand any additional parking, change the amount of commercial square footage or space being allocated to that use, then I think that would probably be considered a continuation of that non-conforming use.
Okay, good. That clears up my question.
Any other questions?
This is Tamara. And I looked at the entire EVTZ regulations in the plan, but I didn't see any mention of affordable housing. And then I looked at the regulations under section 118, and I don't see East Norwalk mentioned as a zone for affordable housing. So is affordable housing or workforce housing going to be included in the EVTZ zone? East Norwalk.
Yes, you may recall, and it's probably been 3-4 months now, we did revise the workforce housing regulations. So all multifamily developments are under the same set of regulations. So anybody that builds 3 or more units is required to comply with the workforce housing regulations. It doesn't matter what zone you're in.
Okay.
Steve, one question, if I may. I should have picked this up earlier. The Bank of America site on Winfield, that's this little triangle to the right-hand side. I thought that reverted to retail, to residential.
Yes, it did. They've I believe it's under construction or
It is,
beginning construction. Yeah, so they, even under the old, or I shouldn't say old, the current neighborhood business regulations, you can still do residential.
Okay, so shouldn't we make that piece totally residential now?
It's proposed to convert to residential.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, if the regulations had been in place before that was approved, you would probably have a different project there.
Exactly.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll ask some questions, and if anybody else needs to jump in. This is on page 10. Steve, it talks about shaded public seating. Outdoor only, all seating shaded by trees or artificial means. What's artificial means?
Muted, Steve.
Yeah, sorry. So that could be by a canopy of some kind. It could be through, some kind of trellis structure or umbrellas or something along those lines. So it would be something that has to be, semi-permanent at least. That makes sense.
In a way, I'm thinking of somebody coming in with a cheap thing and, getting bonus points for it. That's what I'm thinking.
There, and some of this has been brought up before. I mean, I think the part of the special permit process, which is, required for anybody to realize any of these amenities, is they have to show us what they're building, and it has to go through that level of review. And all these projects that come in under this are going to go through architectural design review as well. So there's another layer of review that's going to happen on top of city review, commission review, and then you'll have the outside peer review as well.
Okay, what is a powered seating?
So that would be something like if you were there and you wanted to sit there and charge your cell phone, something like that, you could do that.
So it's a station sit on for purpose of charging your cell phone or whatever? That's what that means?
It's right. Yeah, and I think the max, I can pull up the document if you'd like, but I think they can get a point for that if it's included.
No, it says a point. I'm reading from your thing here. It says a point for powered seating. What is a floor junction box? You guys might know. I don't know what that is.
I think that allows, part of the intent is, some of these, will somebody put one of these in? I'm not sure. Maybe they will, but some of this, the idea is if you can have some of these larger plazas with active space that maybe they could serve multiple purposes. Maybe they could have music there or something like that. And so that provides the ability to have just different things going on, different ways to power up and things.
That means you can get power from this box on the floor and the ground.
Yeah, and it would also, and ideally it would connect to, either provide Wi-Fi or broadband or those kind of things.
Well, you have an additional point for free Wi-Fi separate. So, I don't know. I hadn't heard of powered seating. I have a few more. Public art. Now, who's going to judge public art? Somebody comes in with that picture that's in here, just doesn't do anything for me. And art's in the eye of the beholder. I understand, but are we going to have stuff versus stuff? So who's the judge on public art? They get 2 points for public art, so they can put two stones together and say this is art to me. And I get 2 bonus points.
Yeah, and that's obviously, there's definitely some subjectivity built into that particular one. What we've tried to do, in addition to the multi-layers, we will be also referring that out to the Arts Commission for their comment as well. And obviously, there's no strict standard on what's acceptable art and what's not acceptable art, but it'll be a group collective positive or negative vote for something like that.
Okay, we want a green wall. I could see a wall with ivy on it, and somebody gets 2 points for that. Is that what we're thinking of a green wall? What's a green wall?
It could. I don't think we have any set definition of what the green wall standard is. That's something we could add in if you wanted, had some concerns about that. I could mention that to the zoning commission. I don't think that, we could add some text underneath that explanatory box on the left side to kind of further define that if you want some more, to beef it up a little bit.
Well, where I'm going with is, good ideas, but it can't be minimal standards, right? Like I said, I used the ivy on a wall. It's a green wall. So maybe a little bit more of these things, right? Not just throwing it up and people, for a minimal thing, they get these bonus points, which leads them to my last thing over here. If they provide 15 points, but at least 10 points must be sustainable amenities, they go from 2.5 stories to 3.5 stories, so, or 45 feet. So what I'm saying here is it shouldn't be minimal things that are, we're putting out there. It's good that they can get points and stuff, but they have to be meaningful. And let me ask you this before I forget. There's no AstroTurf stuff in any that people are going to get points for.
No,
You
that
know how
wouldn't
it-
be, that wouldn't be looked at as a sustainable feature. But if you look at like the green wall, for example, it's got a minimum of 500 square feet. So it's not inconsequential. That's a pretty good size area.
Right, I didn't have time, or I didn't think of it, to look up what a green wall in other places is.
Fran,
Mike,
I'm
you
sorry.
back up there saying-
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I
Okay.
have, I can answer that for you.
I was gonna
green
call on you
wall.
to answer.
Yeah, a green wall is not a wall that has just ivy planted on it. And I could understand how you wouldn't be, familiar with that phrase. It's in landscape architecture. It's a trend, and it's a wall that has plants growing out of it. So it has soil in it. It's vertical. It's basically like a flat plant bed, but put on a vertical. And it has irrigation at the top that drips down into it. And so it's kind of a high-tech thing. And then the plants grow right out of the wall. And usually they're a tapestry of different kinds of plants. They're very popular in Europe. There's a museum I saw once in Paris that had one that was gigantic that hit a highway right along the river. It was like I forget the name of the museum, but they are being used more. But it's not just a green wall is a integrated structure that has plants growing out of it, basically, not just planted ivy, even though it sounds like it would be the same, but it's not.
And it's meant to be like for heating and cooling of the building, as opposed to just a flat wall, which might either absorb or reflect heat back out.
Oh, thank you. And Mike, I said I was gonna call on you. I figured you would know the answer to that one. So thank you for jumping in. Now, this brings me to my last area. A lot has been said about the 2.5 stories, 35 feet, to 3.5 to 45 feet. So I want to, as you know, I live in East Norwalk. Brian Baxendale lives in East Norwalk, and there are streets here, and I'll call out on one of them on Myrtle Street. There are houses there that I'm familiar with that are 3 floors, and they're tall. I mean, they're so I look at that as a guideline, if you will. Now they're probably 30, 35 feet, but I can't, I didn't go take a picture or whatever. So they're existing, people see this 35 feet, whatever it is, 2.5 stories, whatever it is. And it's caused a lot of commenting, if you will. So we're not going to the residential areas. We're on East Avenue, right? And the other businesses, the delis and all that. And so I think it's all good. We need to bring people in. I'm going to make a comment about the delis and backing in parking. When Norton was at its heyday, it had 5,000 people. That time was called Winfield Deli. And the line of people was backed up under the sidewalk. Parking has always been the same, Mike, and I don't know of accidents that have happened, backing into traffic, but it's so. And I've talked to Steve Kleppen about this as well. We need housing as well, but we also need some businesses to bring people to do stuff here in town. the Norton employment was the largest as the city at the time, but employees, they, of any company, they go out to lunch, they support restaurants, they go to the delis, they go to the laundromats, they go to the grocery store so that they do grocery shopping during lunch. So when they go home, they don't have to if they don't live here in town. So housing is good. I think bringing businesses in has to come as well to add to the vitality of the neighborhood. You heard me talking before, and as to how alive it was, and it's because of various things. So this is just East Avenue, and some streets are affected, but it's not into residential neighborhoods and knocking things down and whatever. So it's not perfect, but I think it's good where we are. So I'm going to leave it at that. Any other comments from anybody?
This is Tamara. I do have a question. I was looking at the amenities. So the amenities for the developers, is that just going to be on East Ave, or does it go down? There's another commercial area, Fort Point Street. So will that also be required to have the amenities under the plan?
So the amenities, yeah, so anywhere within the gray, silver with the black outline, those are the properties that are in the new zone. So these are the ones, if they wish to go beyond the two and a half stories, 35 feet, or seek additional density, they're required to provide the amenities. If they don't seek that, say they stay at 2.5 stories and 35 feet, and they just keep the underlying density, there are still the design standards they have to comply with in terms of the aesthetic of the building. They still have to put in the wider sidewalks, but they aren't required to put in any of those amenities that are in that separate section of the text. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
My question basically was that it includes East Avenue, but can these amenities be required off of East Avenue?
Yeah, I should have kept the map up. So the amenities are just applicable to these grayish silver parcels here. One's kind of running north-south along East Ave.
Mm-hmm.
And these over here too, but the gray silver ones.
Okay. So it will be required that's Van Zant Street. So Van Zant Street would be able to take advantage of these amenities as well?
Yeah, just these parcels within this area here.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get like these over here and anything on this side, obviously they're not within the new zone, so they're not eligible. The zoning in that area is not changing.
Okay.
Anybody else? Tammy?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, because your picture popped up. All right. All right. If there are no other comments or questions, I'm going to put the resolution forth to approve.
Very small.
Returning second.
I'd like to second that one, Fran.
Okay, Brian seconded. All in favor?
Oh, you want to do a roll call?
Yeah, do a roll. It's okay. Steve, do a roll call. Go ahead.
Sure. Mr. Baxendale?
Yes, approved.
Ms. Peniston?
Yes.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Mushak?
I actually have.
Yes, and Tammy, your conversation is coming through on your speaker. Just wanted to let you know. Anyway.
With that said, Ms. Langalis?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Shockley?
Yes.
And Ms. DeMeglio?
Yes.
Okay, unanimous.
Okay, now we can move on to the approval of minutes. Are you guys ready to, I wasn't here, so I'm going to be abstaining. Are you guys ready to look at the minutes, or you haven't had time to look at them?
And Fran, I'll have to abstain too because I also was not at the last meeting.
Right. So do you guys want to look at the minutes, or you want to move it?
I've read them and I have no corrections.
Listen, Tammy, you got to go on mute because your conversation's coming through and I cannot hear. I don't know what anybody else said about regarding the minutes, except for Mary, that she's abstaining along with me.
I have no revisions.
No revisions? Okay.
No revisions.
No revisions.
All right. So I put forth.
And
that
sorry, I
the-
don't have any corrections. I said, thank you.
Okay. So I'm putting forth to approve the minutes of October 13. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I will abstain and Mary will abstain because we weren't here. Okay, so the minutes are approved. All right, we go to comments of director, Steve and or Brian.
Yeah, the only thing I'll, two quick points. If anybody hasn't, or it's actually the same point. If anybody hasn't had a chance to look at the map for the waterfront kind of online, I'll call it a survey for lack of better terms to, comment on. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at that, please do. And if you want me to send the link out again, I can send that out tomorrow, but it's kind of a neat little process where you can go in and make comments on different parts of the waterfront study area. And we're getting a lot of good feedback on that right now and reaching out to as many people as we can. So if you haven't had a chance, please take a look when you can. The first kind of committee meeting on that is next week, and I'm forgetting the date, and I can send an email out with that as well. But I think Tammy Langalis is representing the Planning Commission on that study. So that's kind of just starting to kick off now.
Steve, I think that's one of the best questionnaire things that we've had so far in any of the public response things. That little map is a lot of fun.
Yeah, we actually put up hard copies. We have one in City Hall. We have them in both libraries and at the senior center. And I'm now working with a couple different school teachers to try to get some school classes to participate as well. So I think should have
Do you
some.
know how many
broad
responses
range.
we've received so far?
I had that number today in my head, but we've had over 600 people look at it, but around 10% actually responded. So we've had like I said, over 600 people went and looked at it, but not everybody chose to comment.
Maybe send it again.
Yeah, and I asked the consultant today, we were on a call, and she said she thought the response was about on par with what they typically get. So we're going to keep it open for at least probably the next 3 weeks. And so we should probably get some really good feedback, I think.
Are you working with any other neighborhood groups? Like I send it around on the 6th taxing district, but ENNA or any of these other neighborhood groups and ask them to forward it again.
Yeah, we did that. Yeah, and we have done that already. And what we talked about, when we had the same kind of conversation when we had the zoning regulation charrette was, while we do it once, we have to make sure we do it a second time as a reminder. And then we also send it, we've been developing a broad list of folks to contact for any kind of outreach for this. Like we've been trying to get good rapport with the churches to have them send it out to their congregations. The library sends it out on their blast. So we'll probably do it, one additional time as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Steve, was that it for you?
That's it for me.
Okay, comments of commissioners. Anybody? I have a couple, so you guys go first.
I have one question. I'm looking at the waterfront plan. Is this going to include the waste facilities, the city waste facilities? Are you looking at redeveloping that area? I can't really see from this map whether that's included.
Yeah, that property's in the study area. Similar recommendation was done in the East Norwalk TOD plan. Like, so there's actually two functions on that broader property. One is the treatment plant, and that the treatment plant's not going anywhere. It's just, that's where it's going to be. But the other part of that is the DPW garages there, where they have all like the trucks and the plows and everything. Ideally, if we could relocate that somewhere else in the city, where that somewhere else is, I don't know. That's another kind of exercise we need to go through. But if we could repurpose that property or some of that property for something else where it could be, you know, return the waterfront to the waterfront, that would be a good thing. So that's, I think that'll be a recommendation in the plan that comes out.
So the only thing you're looking at is just taking away the parking facility, the city parking facility. Everything else stays?
Yeah, so the wastewater treatment plant really can't be located anywhere else. That's where it has to stay. You know, I can't say how much of the DPW property we could capture, just because if the wastewater treatment plant ever needed to expand in the future, I don't know if they would need more land. So I can't give any kind of definitives on how much of that area would be repurposed. But I think the idea is, with these kind of plans, when you put that idea in there, there's kind of like a nexus to the next step. Like if you ever go for funding for things, you can point back to this plan and say, well, the city looked at this in 2021 and thought it was a good idea to recapture that space for something else. And then it makes you eligible for grant funding or other sources of, you know, funds that could be available to take a deeper dive into that.
And the waste disposal for I would say for yard waste disposal, that stays?
I don't know if I have an answer to that right now. I don't know if we have gotten down to that kind of granular level.
Okay.
Steve, I had a question to follow up on what we discussed briefly about that development, the RFPs. You want to touch on that? Do you speak to Brian yet, or you want to talk about it another time?
Oh, did you get my email? Because I guess you didn't.
Yeah, was it today?
No, I sent it right after I talked to you.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, no problem. The whole gist of it was that I got indication of an RFP, so I wanted to look closer into it so that some of the things in the POCD could be addressed in it with the different potential developers. Just want to know if they're utilizing what the needs of the city is for more than one thing, but in one particular was affordable housing and so forth. So I'm looking forward to seeing what I could see and what support I can have to not have there be any major issue with the public-private partnerships going forward and stuff like that. So thought I could help you guys out a little bit.
Sure. And just so everybody, for what Steve's
Please.
talking about is that the redevelopment agency issued an RFP regarding redevelopment of the Webster Street lot, which has been on kind of the kicked around and talked about for many years, even long before I got here. So they put out an RFP looking for requests for proposals from different development firms that might have the ability to redevelop that into something more than just a parking lot. So, and they have a lot of different caveats they required in terms of replacing all the park. Yeah.
Like a complex concept, but dealing with Alex Knopp in the past with the Webster lot and the parking area and the surrounding buildings. I'm looking forward to seeing how that looks, so that doesn't become a dragged out situation, because the opportunity is nice along Dr. Martin Luther King for residential housing. I like to push the affordable housing piece because it's been sprinkled with many individuals about that corridor, being a good position for that. And I know the city supports that. So one of those.
Just clarification, Steve. I don't know what that means.
Well, what it means is
as
there's an
far
RFP. There's an RFP that went out, the redevelopment agency issued for potential development in that area, and I just wanted
No,
to know how
I
far.
got that part.
Okay.
But I got that part. I'm saying your involvement, saying and helping out. I don't know what that means.
Just looking at the plan as it goes, as it's presented to the public. So I don't feel like I'm blindsided. You know how sometimes we get material last minute. With this particular one, I want to be in tune with what the public is seeing.
No, it's all good. I'm just saying, is that a part of your banking role or your planning
No, it's
commission?
not a part
role?
of my banking role. No, it's just, I just like to see what's going on. There's nothing at all to do with banking. It's planning
It's like I
commission.
said, clarification, right? I didn't know where you were coming
I
from.
don't think I
That's
mean,
all.
I mean, if I had a stake or something, I would definitely say it. Or, you know, it's just being young.
Okay, so that's your, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow. You're saying, and I'm looking at this. So you're saying that they are looking at developing that parking lot on
Yes.
MLK Boulevard, the housing?
They actually offered a proposal for what ideas could be made in that area. So I just wanted to.
And one of them would be affordable housing?
No, I do know for a fact that affordable housing has been on the plate for that area for a while. So I just want to
Okay.
I just asked Steve how far are we along in that process? And he said, nothing. He'll let us know like he normally does. So that's all.
Steve, Steve Ferguson, I'll add to that. I see that lot from my house, you know, like down the hill, and I can see the back of the movie theater and all that. But it breaks my heart every time I go in that parking lot to know that there were 4 square blocks of historic buildings that look just like Washington Street that were taken away in the probably 1965 or something to make way for the 50 Washington. And that parking lot was built, you know, to service that building. And I want to just say that it almost happened to Washington Street. They were going to build a second tower like 50 Washington, and they were going to demolish all of Washington Street, you know, and all the way down on Water Street, and be another giant parking lot. And so we're actually, there's a memorial service for, I'll just segue into this for common knowledge for everybody, but Tish Gibbs, who was married to Mayor Bill Collins at the time. Her memorial service is Sunday at 1 o'clock at the Congregational Church on the Green. But she was around back then, and she and Bill and a whole bunch of people saved South Norwalk from the wrecking ball. And they literally they really blocked it. You know, I mean, they just, and that's how we have Washington Street. But that Webster lot, there was a Webster Street that went through there, which is no longer there. And it was lined with all those old buildings. A lot of people don't know that. And the street went out to the movie theater where that plaza is, where the hamburger place is. That was a street. And there was just 4 blocks of really beautiful old buildings. They were run down, but that's what they did back then. They demolished them. And so,
when I was a kid, I remember there being a fountain going down there, a fountain going towards North Main. But besides the point,
you're not that old. You must have been little when you saw that. Yeah, but
45.
Anything's better than one big parking lot there. And yeah.
So the good news, the city is doing a lot, and it's hard to keep up the pace even as a commissioner. So I know that sometimes you spend a lot of time and hours on these particular things like the TOD and other things. I think some things could be a little bit more smooth just by looking at it. So I get my own knowledge.
I understood what you were saying, and that you didn't want to be any surprises for the planning commission. As long as we're
okay.
Force here.
Anybody else? So I have 2 things. One is, the merger of the Planning and Zoning Commission will take effective January 2022. It's 9 members and 3 alternates, but I don't have any other details. So it's up to the to the mayor to come up with who the commissions are going to be, commissioners, and that will make up the Planning and Zoning Commission. I don't have any no knowledge of anything, and so that's all I know on that one. We are where we are, and whenever the mayor decides to come up with the list, that's his prerogative. Number two, I want to touch upon, we had a brief conversation some months ago
Fran,
about circular. Yeah,
Fran, before you go to number two, does that mean our last meeting as a planning commission is in December?
that's correct. As far as
Thank
we
you.
know, planning commission is the December meeting. And then if it's known by then, I don't know, I don't have any detail, but Mary, to your answer, your question, yes, the planning commission last meeting is the December meeting. Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, well, we'll have to have a some kind of toast as a group. It's been really lovely working with this whole group.
Yeah, just FYI, we might need to move that meeting, by the way.
To what is it now? And to move it to what?
Brian, you remember if it's is it the 8th or the?
So the meeting right now is scheduled for the 8th. So we'd have to move it off that date.
What's the 8th?
So
we
zoning
have
commission has to hold a special meeting for the 283 Richards Avenue application. And that was the only meeting that we could get the commissioners and the applicant to all be able to attend. So that's where
Well,
we're
let's
at
do
with that.
things. Okay, so what are we looking at? The following week?
Yeah, we could either do the following week or the week before, or we could shift days. The week of where we already have the meeting of the 8th. So we either do the 9th. I don't know what Steve's schedule looks like, but
We can be flexible on that. That's fine.
But we don't have another meeting. We had the meeting was what, December 8th, right? So you're gonna move it out the following week? I don't think we had anything else planned for that, for planning commission, did we?
Yeah, right now I don't, Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not aware of any items on that agenda at this point.
no, usually they start trickling in later in the month.
No, the month is pretty much, it's gonna be, we're gonna blink and it's gonna be gone. So are we looking at, what's that following Wednesday after the 8th?
15th of December.
So that's another zoning commission meeting. So then we could either do, let's see. So it would either be, you could do the 14th, 16th, 7th, or 9th, kind of anywhere in there is.
So it's either Tuesday or Thursday, you're saying?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna vote for Tuesday of that week, not the following week.
Okay.
14th.
No, the 7th. No, 6th,
The
It'd be the
14th,
7th.
7th.
7th or 14th is what you're looking at.
7th or 14th.
Yes.
I'd be fine with either.
I have a meeting on the 7th.
I was proposing the 14th.
I'm good on the 14th.
Where,
I can support that.
I'm okay with 14th.
I'm good.
Anybody else?
14.
I'm good
Okay.
14th so far, December.
okay, so
I
Fine.
haven't been invited to any Christmas parties yet, so I'm okay. I think I'm just unpopular anymore.
Steve Clapper, we're gonna move it to the 14th.
Yeah, it sounds like everybody can make it, so we'll put that on your calendars, and that's when we'll go ahead.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
All right, so my number 2 item was a few months ago or something, we had a brief discussion on circular driveways and how they are not allowed in Norwalk. So I thought about it and I'm saying to myself now, why aren't they allowed in Norwalk? And how do we get them allowed? I mean, I don't understand why they're not there and why they can't be there. We're also looking at the accessory buildings, the accessory apartments. Now, I'm not for making a parking lot of somebody's front lawn or anything, but why can't we do circular driveways? And so, Steve Kleppen, where are we on that?
So when you asked me about that the other day, I think I was not at that meeting when you discussed that, so that's why I don't think it rang a bell. But the long and short of it, Norwalk has really restrictive parking in the front yard setback regulations that are vigorously enforced, and probably, when we as you know, we're completely rewriting the zoning regulations, and when staff met with the consultant team, that was one item we flagged that we said, you need to fix this because it's just a mess. So that's part of it. I think that's like the biggest issue. There is another item with that too, is DPW doesn't always like circular driveways too, because that adds more curb cuts. Sometimes there's safety concerns with lines of sight where, if a driveway is too close to a corner and someone doesn't have adequate ability to see traffic coming one way or the other, that puts people in a different or dangerous situation. There's a couple of different factors, but I think that overall issue will get addressed as part of the comprehensive rewrite.
So I, for myself, and whoever is on the new planning and zoning or whatever, all due respect to DPW, I think we need to look at it, and if it makes sense and people have the property or whatever you want to say, it should be allowed. I just don't. To me, it's like I don't know, doesn't make any sense. And I don't know about the rest of you, if you have any comments on circular driveways, but I think it should be looked at, and to use Steve's words, it should be fixed. And let's get on with it. So that's where I am on that one. Anybody else want to chime in or whatever?
I agree with you, Fran and Steve, that Kleppen, I'm glad that it was flagged, which I knew about, but I am very familiar with this as a landscape architect because, so many times I work in other towns and I advise people, you don't have to back out onto, let's say, Leroy Avenue in Darien or some other crazy busy street, because in Darien and in Westport and in New Canaan, you're allowed to have a turnaround so that you can back into a spot in the front yard and point your car straight out so that you can see who's coming, including bicycles and pedestrians. And in Norwalk, that's not allowed because you cannot build a parking spot in the front yard. And I understand the intent of the regulation was to prevent paving of front yards, which I applaud. But I think there's a balance here and a solution that every other town that I work in seems to have come up with. And Norwalk has really been draconian. And that word is draconian in terms of its enforcement of not being able to park your car in the front yard setback. And I think there's a balance here so we don't have paved front yards and certainly circular drives where the clearance is, sight distance is fine, should be allowed. It just makes a lot of sense. But anyway, Fran, thank you for bringing that up. And I'm looking forward to that conversation, either as a member of the public or whatever hat I'm wearing.
I'm going to tell you another side to that. I was in West Haven with my wife this Saturday, and there was a major road, and you can park in your front yard. And we saw 4 or 5 cars in front of a house, but you couldn't park on the street. So it's interesting how, it can go both ways. It could be a really bad eyesore too. So it has to be done in proper taste, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. There has to be, standards.
Because people just park right in front of the house at night.
Just so everybody's clear, we don't regulate where you park your cars. We regulate where the required parking spaces go. So if somebody, to Steve's point, if somebody parks 8 cars in their front lawn, that's not a zoning issue. It's if they pave 8 spaces on the front lawn, that's the zoning issue.
Very good. Well, I have a friend in Stanford and she has a circular, the driveway. It's great. And so it was the back of my mind and then our little conversation. So that's why I brought it up, and we'll see how it moves forward. Okay, is there, let's see, anybody else have anything to bring up? Okay, so with that, I'm losing my words here. We're at the last item on the agenda, adjournment. Who's making a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you,
Aye.
everyone, and thank you, and
Sure.
we'll see you in December. Be well.
Have a nice Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
happy